The Wallis Island. Amidst the Indonesian archipelago lie a pair of islands separated by an ancient boundary, simultaneously existing and intangible. Though imperceptible to the eye, its presence remains undeniable. Standing on Bali's coastline and gazing eastward towards Lombok, one would find themselves fixating on the narrowest section of this line, a 32 kilometers expanse of water that appears rather unremarkable. This inconspicuous divide winds its way through the entirety of the Malay archipelago, a vast collection of islands unrivaled in scale. On the western side, the indigenous wildlife showcases an unmistakably Asian character, boasting the likes of rhinoceroses, elephants, tigers, and woodpeckers, among others. However, crossing this boundary instantaneously transforms the ecological landscape. The eastern islands host an entirely distinct array of creatures, including marsupials, Komodo dragons, cockatoos, and honey-eaters. Scientists refer to this phenomenon as a biogeographic boundary, wherein two markedly diverse regions of biodiversity converge. Among these boundaries, the Wallis Line stands out as one of the most pronounced and emblematic. But how did this imperceptible line come into existence? What accounts for its influence on species distribution? How did we unravel its precise trajectory? And how can it simultaneously possess both tangible and intangible qualities? The concept of the Wallis Line was initially outlined in 1859 by Alfred Russel Wallace, a renowned British naturalist and co-discoverer of the theory of natural selection. Interestingly, this idea dawned upon Wallace during a bout of malaria-induced fever while he was bedridden during his extensive 8-year expedition across the Malay archipelago. Although he would later be overshadowed by Darwin in terms of natural selection, the existence of the Wallis Line became one of Wallace's most significant contributions. This notion solidified his position as the pioneer of biogeography, the study of the geographical distribution of living organisms. Throughout his voyage, Wallace diligently observed and collected numerous species, traversing from one island to another across the vast archipelago. It was during his journey from Bali to Lombok that he first encountered something fascinating. Despite the narrow strait separating the two islands, the transition in animal life was not gradual or subtle, but rather sudden and distinctive. In fact, Wallace found the differences in animal life between the two regions to be even more pronounced than those between England and Japan. Birds particularly captured his attention. Species abundant in Java and Bali, such as the yellow-headed weaver, coppersmith barbet, and Javanese three-toed woodpecker, were completely absent on Lombok. This abrupt shift in fauna extended to mammals, and even numerous insect species, almost as if an imperceptible barrier was separating two distinct worlds. The biogeographic line initially drawn by Wallace, and later refined by subsequent researchers, was not solely determined by the geographical proximity of the islands. Surprisingly, certain islands on opposite sides of the line are actually closer to each other than many islands on the same side. This observation led Wallace to recognize that other enigmatic forces must be at play, such as geology. He understood that the biological present is intricately shaped by the geological past. Recognizing that the distribution of present-day living species partially reflects ancient geological events, Wallace saw biogeography as a means to unveil grand chapters of the planet's history that would otherwise remain unknowable. Although these concepts may seem commonplace today, they were still relatively new during Wallace's era. Adopting this perspective, Wallace concluded that the Western Islands must have once been interconnected, forming a landmass linked to the Asian mainland. The current presence of shallow seas surrounding these islands is attributed to a relatively recent rise in sea levels from a geological standpoint. This geological history offered an explanation as to how larger animals such as tigers, rhinos, and tapirs could have reached these islands, as the expanses of water separating them today are far too wide for such species to traverse. Similarly, Wallace surmised that some islands located east of Java and Borneo were remnants of a former Australian continent, shedding light on their formation. Wallace believed that, amid the vast transformations, deep waters with powerful currents between the two regions must have acted as barriers, preventing numerous species from crossing between continents during periods of lower sea levels. Even today, when sea levels are higher and the continents are fragmented into neighboring groups of islands, these barriers continue to hinder species from crossing. This includes various flying bird and insect species that lack the capability to traverse vast stretches of open ocean. Wallace had successfully pieced together many elements of the puzzle, but there was one crucial idea that he, along with other scientists of his time, had not yet grasped: plate tectonics. The Earth's surface is dynamic, composed of large individual sections or plates undergoing movement and collisions over immense geological periods. While we now take plate tectonics for granted, it was a relatively recent addition to our understanding, becoming widely accepted only in the late 1960s, long after Wallace's passing. We now recognize that plate tectonics plays a significant role in shaping our planet, including the formation and deformation of continents, the emergence of island chains, and the creation of mountain ranges. The Malay Archipelago, renowned for its complexity, serves as a convergence zone for multiple plates, constantly jostling for space. Consequently, the region is marked not only by numerous volcanoes and frequent seismic activity, but also by the distinctive contrasts in its animal life. By the 1980s, scientific studies provided a confident assertion that the Wallace Line is fundamentally a product of plate tectonics. Wallace had correctly deduced the existence of two former continuous landmasses on either side of this line in the distant past. These landmasses, now known as the paleocontinents of Sunda in the west and Sahul in the east, were present during the ice ages when a substantial amount of water was locked up in ice, leading to lower sea levels. Unbeknownst to Wallace, these partly sunken continents were once much farther apart than they are today. The Sahul continent, located on the eastern side of the line, encompassed Australia, Tasmania, New Guinea, and the Aru Islands. It only approached the Asian Sunda continental shelf in the west around 20 to 25 million years ago, during the late Oligocene or early Miocene epoch. This occurred as a result of the Australian plate gradually drifting north over tens of millions of years after breaking away from Antarctica in the south, bringing along its unique community of birds, reptiles, and marsupials. Despite the close proximity of species on each side today, they have been evolving separately for an extensive period, their worlds only converging relatively recently in evolutionary terms. East of the line, plate tectonics gave rise to a chain of new islands in an area now known as Wallacea, situated between the continental islands. Unlike the continental islands, these oceanic islands were never connected to either of the major land masses. They presented ecological canvases ready to be populated by whichever creatures managed to reach them. Predominantly, species from the Australian side colonized these islands, as the Wallace Line acted as a barrier preventing the eastward movement of Asian species. For instance, consider the Komodo dragon, a massive monitor lizard currently inhabiting a few islands in eastern Indonesia. Fossil evidence places their origins in mainland Australia over 3 million years ago during the Pliocene epoch, with their arrival in the Indonesian islands of the Wallacea region occurring approximately 1 million years ago. Even today, the deep waters with strong currents between the two regions, including the strait between Lombok and Bali, impede the dispersal of many species across the line. This phenomenon maintains the strikingly visible differences in their evolutionary histories. It is this stark contrast that Wallace initially illustrated in his 1859 sketch, captivating biogeographers to this day. Wallace's invisible line may lack a physical presence, yet it serves as a testament to the resounding echoes of ancient geological events and their profound influence on the diversity and distribution of life in peculiar and contrasting ways. While Darwin receives the majority of the credit for unraveling the mechanisms of species formation, Wallace remains acknowledged as a trailblazer in understanding the factors shaping the placement of species in various locations. The astonishing diversity of life on either side of the Wallace Line serves as a reminder that nature is a master architect, adapting and evolving in harmony with its surroundings. It is our responsibility to safeguard these fragile ecosystems, to protect the unique species and habitats that call the Wallace Line their home. By doing so, we preserve not just the wonders of today, but the possibilities of tomorrow. What do you find most fascinating about the Wallace Line? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest content. We appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you in the next video.